This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today we're going to be going over and discussing projects and tasks. Projects and tasks, I'm sure everybody has their own ideas or mindsets or thought process of what those are and how they relate to each other. Yours may be different than ours, and that's okay. We're just going to go over what our definition for those are. So a project, for me anyways, is a group or grouping of tasks that all those tasks inform and help to achieve the common goal or the overall goal of what the project is. And a task is a one action item. And it's as simple as that. Now a task, again, is one thing. It is one step to be completed. Now that one step to be completed doesn't mean that it can't reoccur. So for example, tasks that I have, I have a couple of reoccurring tasks. One of them would be to wipe my kitchen counters. I click the box. Yep, I did that. Okay, it's done. But tomorrow it's going to come up again. Now it is a one action item, one action to complete that item, but it reoccurs. Now that one action item can go towards the overall project, in this specific case of keeping my house clean. And keeping my house clean, I have 15 tasks that are inside of there, and they're all informed on each other and help to achieve the common goal of cleaning my house. So I guess the idea for this is, or rather the difficult part for this is, if you have a project, how do you know, or how do you know if or why or when you should break that big task, that big project down into small or smaller individual action items? That would be perhaps one of the starting points of our discussion for today. So, Mr. Kent, do you have any ideas or thought process of how to perhaps break some, if you have a big project, let's say? So for us, we had just recently finished the project of setting up our recording space. And for those of you guys that don't know, we record this in my garage. We set up some relatively rudimentary soundproofing, sound treatment items. I think it works fine for us, but setting up this space for us was a project that we had. And so one of the steps was, okay, or let's backtrack. The overall project was set up recording space. And so do you have any, sorry, I asked you a question, then I didn't follow through with actually asking you it. What are your ideas or mindsets of how to break those down, and we can use this project as an example, as a sounding board for that.
Sure, yeah. Even thinking about cleaning, and talking about the idea of projects versus tasks. Tasks being the smaller objectives along the way toward completing a larger project. Sometimes in my mind too, I also think that projects are the long term, whereas tasks might be a short term type thing. So in the case of setting up this studio, this recording area, the project, like you said, was to set up the area where we can sit and record. But the tasks were, get this piece of equipment, get this piece of furniture, set up this soundproof device, set up this heating device, whatever it is. Those small tasks contributed to the larger project as a whole. But also, again, in my mind, a task is a present time or short term type thing, whereas the project is a long, it might take longer. It's more of a long term, maybe more for the future kind of thing. So, even tying that into, like you're just saying, cleaning your house. Cleaning your house is the project, which is comprised of many tasks. Wipe the counters, put the dishes away, sweep the floor, take out the trash. All those tasks combine together to complete the project of cleaning the house. So I guess that's just another way to think about it, is projects being maybe more long-term, depending on what it is, and your task being a little more short-term. But yeah, I would agree with kind of the way you broke it down there as well, with the addition of that other perspective.
Right. And I guess listening to you to talk about those, as far as the project being a long-term item and then a task being a short-term item, linking back to what we talked about last time. So we have our in goals, we have our SMART goals or OKRs, and then kind of the next step down would be the project, and then the next step down from that would be the task. And so the task would be like a daily type thing, that you would do, in the short term, here and now, and then those tasks could be linked to or help to accomplish the project, and the project is something that's going to happen in the future, and that project hopefully aligns with your SMART goal, and then that SMART goal hopefully aligns with your end goal.
Right, yeah. I think it's a good way to also view that kind of scenario too, and it also makes some of those more difficult or larger processes or projects or end goals seem a little more manageable. Kind of goes into those SMART goals of having the things that you can track and you can be aware of your progress, rather than I have to clean this whole entire house. No, I have to sweep. Now I have to take the trash out. Now I have to wipe the counter down. And eventually you do each task individually. Number one, I think it keeps you more motivated because you're not having to focus on the large project, but you're just doing task by task by task, and eventually those tasks build up to complete that project. It kind of goes with, we were just talking this week about the idea that motivation follows action. You have to clean the whole house. Well, it doesn't always seem like the most appealing thing, and it might seem like a daunting task, but
especially if you think about it as terms of, I have to clean the whole
entire house, right? Yeah. So break that big project into tasks, and then start one of those tasks. Like, okay, here's a shoe on the floor. All right, picked up that shoe. Oh, well, there's the other shoe. Pick that one up too. Oh, there's some dirty clothes here too. Let's pick up those dirty clothes. Start the laundry. Might as well start the dishwasher too. Oh, the window's dirty. Clean and taking that first step or completing that first task kind of sets you on the path to getting that project done too. So I think it's just interesting as well that we had talked about that. And then it also kind of plays into this kind of scenario too, task versus projects. And sometimes having to do a small task first will set you on the path of completing those projects comprised of other small tasks and things as well.
Right. Yeah. I think that was it James Clear talks in his book Atomic Habits, talks about taking those small steps. If you want to go to the gym, you want to be the type of person who goes to the gym, then you set yourself up to go to the gym and turn on the treadmill, walk for 10 steps. Okay, turn the treadmill off and then leave. You want to be the type of person who reads, and you open the book, you read one sentence, one page even. Okay, great. Close the book. You're done for the day. And so taking those small steps, even though that they're small, they will help to achieve the motivation that you want or that you need to fulfill whatever that project or task is. Sometimes the hard part, specifically speaking for a project, is you have this huge daunting project trying to figure out what a first step might be, or what is the right first step I have to take for this. And sometimes it doesn't have to be the right first step. It just has to be a step. Even if that's a step in the wrong direction, that step in the wrong direction can help you on the path to being on the right direction. If you think about cleaning, sometimes in order to clean, you have to take, let's say we're cleaning the cabinets. In order to clean the cabinets, I have to take everything out of the cabinets. So on my journey to clean, I have to make everything dirty. I have to clean everything. I have to take everything out. Everything is all over the place. Then I can clean, organize, and put things back. And lots of times throw lots of things away. But in order to do that, my first step has to be in the complete opposite direction that I want to go in order to get me to the end, the desired result that I want. And so with projects specifically, and these could be projects based on yourself, a self-imposed project, or a project that a employer or employee is telling you that you have to do, that you need to do for your job. Great. Let's say you have a proposal to write a grant. Okay, that's my proposal. What are trying to figure out the intentions behind that, or the goal, or the desired outcome of that project, for me, is one of my first steps that I do. Once I have the project, okay, here's the project. Why do I want this as a project? Okay, well, I want it because of this. Great. What is my intended outcome? What is my goal? And those I kind of can be used interchangeably. Why do you want this as a project? How is this going to benefit you or your team or your life or whatever it is? Then Once you have that, then you put a couple steps in the task list for that project assigned to that. Again, they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be necessarily even right. They just have to be kind of in line. Okay, yeah, I might have to do this. Yeah, I might have to do that. Yep, I might have to do that. And then as you're going, you can start to fill out that task list inside of that project. Now, once you have those kind of listed out, your action items to complete that project, then go about perhaps and organize those in such a way that, okay, this seems like it's going to be the first step I need to do. Okay, great. This is the second step. This is the third step. This is, and so on, all the way down, however many you have. Now, if you do that, and if you do it perfectly, great. Unfortunately, almost nobody I know can do this type of process perfectly, meaning they can lay this out, and I have to do this one first, and this one next, and this one, and they never miss any. No, that never happens. Never. I always omit tasks that I should have added from the beginning. I didn't think about the project fully. Okay, I do this, got to do this, got to do this. Okay, great. And then as you get into it, well, in order to do this next step, I have to do X, Y, Z. Okay, great. Well, I got to put those in. Then do those, check those off. Okay, great. Now I can get to that next one that was actually on the list second after I did the first, the in-between things that I didn't plan or account for. So all that to say is, if you are going through this process, if you find yourself adding tasks on the way, or finding yourself even taking tasks out that are no longer relevant, okay, fine. That's part of the process. It's very difficult to fully understand how something is going to go, especially if you've never done it before, every single time. And even if it is something you've done before, it might be different this time compared to the last time. And so there's different things you have to account for or change or tweak on the fly in the moment as you go.
Yeah, and not to say it can't work the other way, but more often than not, you'll have that project idea or project, kind of bigger picture before you'll have your tasks. I mean, like I said, sometimes you start doing something and then start doing something else related to that, and eventually those tasks build into a project. But more often than not, you probably will sit down and say, hey, I want to set up a recording studio. I want to clean my house. I want to paint this picture. Even painting a picture has a small task. You got to get a canvas and get the materials and decide what you're going to paint, and do the different parts of that painting. So either way, again, not that it can't work both ways, but more often than not, you have the project idea first. This is what I want to do, and then it's on you to take the initiative to sit down and analyze, like you said, what do I need to do to get this project done, and then within the small tasks that you just analyzed and created, decide which one is first, or which one is more important, or, even depending on the kind of project, maybe it's one that needs to repeat. Like you said, you got to wipe your counters every day or whatever it is. Sometimes you might have something else going on in the kitchen that needs to be cleaned first. You take care of that one thing first. Like you said, take everything out of the cabinet, clean the cabinet, then put everything back. It wouldn't make sense to clean the cabinet while everything's inside of it first. You might have to take everything out, or, something's on the counter, clean that thing first, and you can wipe your counter down. So just having an idea, and it's hard not to relate this or tie this back into the goals, because it's just a different arena for the same type of idea, where you have the long term or the end goal, your value goals, and your short term goals, and your tasks and things like that attribute or get you to those other long-term goals or the projects in the cases there. And I think the important thing there too is, like you said, finding out which one's more important, or which one is priority, doing the priorities and finding out which one things to go first. Sometimes it's time-based, I have to do this before I can do this, or I have to do this by this time. Not always necessarily was that thing more important, but it could be, a subtask of the task. This task needs this other thing to be done in order to get it done, and that task works towards your project as well. But even sometimes finding that small task, like we talked about, to get yourself motivated, or just finding those small tasks to say, hey, today I did this thing working toward this project. Because sometimes you might not be able to do some of the tasks for whatever reason, but you still want to be able to contribute to that project, or even on a smaller level, feel like you're contributing to that project. So even just setting yourself up to do small, almost seemingly meaningless things just to keep yourself in that right headspace or keep yourself, on that trajectory of completing that project is also important too. Because I think if you have that project, how many times have you, I mean, maybe not you're very disciplined and structured, but how many times have you thought of an idea and said, oh, that'd be really cool if I did this. And then you just never did that idea because you didn't take time to develop the project and the tasks that are required to complete the project. And then 3 years later, you're like, oh, I remember that time I was going to do this and then just never did. Well, I guarantee if you would have sat down and thought about the project and set yourself up with a few tasks, you would have been a high percentage more probable of actually completing or doing said thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. So I have done that definitely in the past. And so now my new protocol, if I have an idea that is something that perhaps might happen in the future, I'll put that down in my project list, and I can tag it as a someday maybe I'll get to this. And I have 2 or 3 of those in there, and there's a couple tasks that are associated with them. There's even some research that go with them that I'm just not, either I'm not ready for mentally, physically, or it's not the right time in my life to do those things. It's something I would like to do in the future, but is not current. Maybe it's not important enough for me right now to take the time investment to do. But I have a couple of those that are on my project board that are sitting and waiting. And there's information in there, there's research that's been done, there's tasks that are in there. They're just not active, not yet.
Yeah, and taking it to the other side of what I had just previously just said too, sometimes you have an idea, and then if you sit with it for a little bit, you realize, hey, well, maybe I don't actually want to do this, or maybe this isn't something that I really do want. That's okay too. It's okay to have that idea and decide not to pursue it. I guess what I mean is sometimes, you have your project list, which you can expand upon more, but you have your list of projects. You have an idea, you write it down. You go back to that list after 2 weeks of seeing it every day, and you really decide, I don't want to do this. I would consider that a failed project because you really had to think for yourself if you wanted to do it or not. And, I think another point there too is that some of these projects, there's a difference between a necessary project or I don't maybe recreational isn't the right word, but something that you want to do for yourself. I would argue, and maybe you would too, that cleaning your house is a necessity, that you might need to do that, especially with more people living in it than just you and for whatever reason, Well,
I do if I want to stay married.
Okay, yes, good. Good necessary project for you there. I would argue strongly that taking care of your personal hygiene is a necessary project, which can be broken down into tasks, So again, and we're just kind of I'm just fleshing this out here. Not that I had put much thought into this before either, but you might have necessary projects and recreational projects. And if you have an idea for a recreational project and after sitting with it for a little bit decide you don't want to do it, I would consider that a failed project. You didn't fail that project. You just thought about it and it's not actually something that you want. Just as like when we talked about goals, it would be silly if you set a goal for yourself, an end goal, a value goal of something you don't really want. Like, why would you do that? Why would you work towards something that you don't want? That's not necessary. So even just talking about that, you might have a few ideas, jot them down. A week later, you decide, I don't want to do this thing. That's okay too. That's fine. Or you just leave it there, and maybe someday, eventually, you will want to do that thing. That doesn't mean the idea is bad. It doesn't fit into what you're working toward or what you're doing right now. That's okay too.
Speaking of those someday maybe type of projects, what I have found is, and I think this is kind of like a for lack of a better term, a feature of our brain. I know I have those 2 or 3 projects that I would like to do at some point in time. My brain is sort of using kind of like background processing to flush out those ideas, flush out those projects. And even though I'm doing, so many other things, I don't have that on my plate right now. But my brain is still working on thinking about using some background processing power to flush out those ideas, which then and I've done this in the past too. I put it on like the someday, okay, maybe I'll get to that later on. And then I'm just kind of not thinking about them, but thinking about them. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, well, it's the idea, taking that same kind of way or mind process or mind feature, as you said. If you have a problem, sometimes sitting down and thinking hard about the problem doesn't always necessarily solve it. But one day you're sitting down, doing mundane things, watching TV, eating some food, and boom, your answer comes to you. Or you take a nap, wake up, boom.
That would be your aha.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, there is something to be said about the way your brain works when you don't have to devote 100% of your attention or focus to a thing, and you're still processing or working on it in the background. So I think that is absolutely viable, either for projects or for problems. Sometimes just sitting and letting that kind of stew or brew does eventually come up with results, or, help us to develop tasks, or help us to make a more well-rounded idea of what our projects are. So yeah, I think that's definitely I don't want to say inadvertent process, because you might need to think, hey, I'm not going to think about this for a while. I'm going to sit down and let the background data processing ensue, and boom, you have some more tasks, or you have an answer to your problem, or whatever it is. That's definitely something that's happened to me before. I'm sure it's happened to other people too, because I do think it, like you said, is a
relatively normal thing.
It's a mental function that the brain does that we don't necessarily have to think about.
Right. It's not like I'm asking my brain to, hey, think about this stuff in the background. No, just happening. And again, I found that to be so beneficial, because I'll put something on the list. I'm not ready for that right now. I don't necessarily have all the bugs worked out for this, and then I'll put it on the list. Oh, that's how I fix that. Pow, do it, and then I can move that to the from dormant or inactive to active. Turn that project on. Boom, ready to go. And I guess this brings us to the next stage: is your projects. You can have active projects. You have projects that are, like we just discussed, someday, maybe I want to do this. This is an idea that I want to perhaps follow through with later on, just not right now. You might have projects that are obviously done, completed. You might have projects that are on hold. Maybe I'm waiting for XYZ, ABC to happen. I have a book that is done, and I've reached out to a publisher, and I can't do anything else. I have to wait for that publisher to say, hey, we want you, or no, we don't want you, or do XYZ, ABC, whatever the next steps are. So my part of that is done. Is it active? Active, I guess, in the sense that they're doing something, but
pending.
It's pending. Sure, my part is done, and so I'm just waiting. That would be another kind of a classification of a project. And I guess perhaps the next part is how maybe you'd want to, in your projects, you want to establish how big of a project they are. So we talked a little bit, kind of inadvertently, we talked about priorities.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, before we move on to that next thing, just about active, pending, waiting, blah, 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 whatever, however you want to define those projects. I think you got to be careful though, because you could be in that active project, and then you could have a next task ready, but you think, I don't want to do that right now. Maybe it's difficult, or maybe it requires a spending of a little bit of money that I don't want to spend right now. I don't know if that's necessarily grounds for putting it into a pending project, or I'm not working on this project because
on hold.
Right. If you have the means to do it, if the task is too hard, or you don't want to spend X, Y, or Z money on it. I mean, obviously nothing outlandish or crazy. You're not going to break your bank to complete this project, hopefully, unless it's a necessary project like, buying a new roof for your house. You probably should take care of that before the roof falls off, and then your whole family is exposed to the elements of the world. Anyways.
As opposed to, I want to be a Facebook, YouTube influencer, so I buy a yacht.
Sure, yes, yeah. I think that'd be a reckless use of your money, unless you have tons of money, then you can justify that spending. Anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is be careful with your reasons for putting projects on hold, because if it's just too difficult, I would question whether or not you really want to actually do that project or not. If it's just, hey, I didn't do this, I'm waiting for the motivation to, again, just do it. find something to get yourself motivated or whatever, and or find some action to do to help pull out the motivation. But maybe it's not making any sense. But
no, I would say that maybe as a standard protocol for you, anytime you have to take a project from active to on hold, you have to put a reason it's on hold, which would call yourself to be accountable. And why am I putting this on hold? Well, it's because I don't actually want to do this right now. Okay, well, that, maybe that will give you the spark to ignite you to continue and do that project. But thinking, or at the very least, it'll give you an opportunity to think, okay, why do I want to stop this right now? What is going on? What's the reason behind this? And, you could argue that, okay, you just skip that step. Okay. But, if that's a standard operating procedure for you, you have an active project, and anytime it goes on hold or on pending or whatever your terminology you're going to use is, you have to state to yourself why you're doing that, which again will cause an internal reflection of, why you're doing that. And hopefully, maybe your priority shifted. I don't actually want to do this. Okay, fine. I want to put this on hold because the next task is too hard and I'm not ready, whatever it is. But then that will cause yourself to think through why you're making that choice, as it make it an unconscious choice, or as a quick thing. I'm just going to put that on hold. I'm done with that. Yeah,
and maybe even a step further there, when you're going through that process, if you decide it's something you want to put on hold for X, Y, or Z reason, it's not like you decided, hey, I don't actually want to do this. I sat down and thought about why I'm trying to put this on hold, and it's not something that I want to do anymore. If it is something you want to do, and you put down a reason, this is the X, Y, or Z reason, maybe even set up a follow-up date for yourself. Say, hey, I'm going to revisit this in 2 weeks and see if I can either complete that task, or see if I feel like doing this, or see if whatever reason can be resolved so I can continue on with this project, instead of just leaving it in limbo for ever. Set a time for yourself to kind of revisit it and see if you can reactivate that project.
Well, and see, that brings up a good point. And before you move into the priorities, your projects, just like your SMART goals, your end goals, you need to have a kind of a reoccurring look at those things. And so if you have a project that's on the board, and that project isn't necessarily going to be completed for 3 months from now, maybe 3 months out, you look at it, every couple weeks, every 2 weeks. Okay. You look at it every 2 weeks, you look at it. And then as it gets closer, okay, you check in on that progress. Okay. It's every week. Okay. And then as it gets closer, it's every other day. And then as it's every day. And then that way you're keeping track of those things. And maybe you do it on a standard every week. At the end of every week, you do your weekly review. Boom, you're checking those things. But I would think that, or I strongly believe that having some sort of review process where you're looking at your current active projects, and maybe on a monthly basis, you're looking at your current on hold or someday type of projects, would be hugely beneficial, just because then you're looking on those, you're checking in on those, you can check to see how close you are to completing it, how far away you are completing it, the next things you have to do, and that kind of can set you up for the the things you have to do for that next week or month, depending on your review for it. So transitioning from that into priorities, we kind of talked about priorities in the tasks, the individual task, and we'll come back to tasks, in a little bit here. But your projects probably should have a priority list associated with them. And so if I have 5 projects on the board, okay, I need to take care of project number 1 first. Okay, then I can, once that action step is done for today, I can move to this one, and so on and so on. So if you have more than one project active at a certain time, you need to assign a priority level to those. What is most important? And then kind of work from there. I do the most important one first, and the next one, so on. And perhaps on that specific day, you can't do any motion, you can't do any movement on the top priority one for whatever the reason is. Okay, fine, then you can move to the next one, and so on. But having a priority list of those will help to set a priority level to those things. And so you can assign those kind of in your brain and for your purpose. I need to work on this, and then I need to work on this, and so on. that is, again, I think very important. Perhaps the next part to that is how big of a commitment, how much energy, how much time is it going to take to complete those things? It would be probably the next kind of item that I would think to add to a project is, okay, this, for example, we talked about the studio recording setup here. This was probably a relatively low energy to put forth. It took a little bit of time to do just because we had to wait for certain things to fall in place and to acquire the certain things and talk about how things were going to be set up. But as far as like energy investment, it was pretty low. Time investment was maybe a little bit higher. And so you kind of have to figure out how those work together and kind of, put those on there. That way, when you look at that project, whether when you're setting it up or when you're reviewing it, you can say, okay, this is going to be a big push. Kind of, is a term that I hear used a lot. This is going to take a lot of energy to do this X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Or no, you know what? This is going to be quick. It's not a huge time investment. It's not a huge energy investment. Just look at it. Okay, great. Yep, good. Check it off. Sign off. Okay, good. Move on. So having some sort of again, maybe you want to call it, think about it in terms of like an energy level, and maybe you work into that energy level as a both an energy level and time commitment, or you separate those out and make them two separate pieces. Would be kind of the next stage or the next topic to work towards or to think about your projects like.
Yeah, and reflecting on this project of setting up the studio and hearing you talk about the idea of priorities too, I think there's another component that plays into that, which can also be another slippery slope, and that is deadlines maybe, or time commitment. Because for our studio, I mean, we didn't really need the studio set up until the end of the year, pretty much is when we plan to start getting some episodes done and some recording done. So, there was a month or two there that we had the idea of the project. We had some tasks we were going to complete, but at the same time, we didn't need to get it done. So, maybe that put this project at a lower priority during some of that time because it wasn't as time sensitive that we got the studio up and we got everything ready and we were good to go. Again, that being said, the slippery slope part there is that you could push things off until the very last minute, and then you have to make that big push when it's too late, and it could, cause some stress or cause unnecessary resource allocation. But, just take an assessment of the different projects you have working on. And if, there's a open timetable, maybe you try to finish a different project first, or you devote your time somewhere else before you kind of, pay attention to that other project. But again, I wouldn't be cautious of neglecting the project and saying, oh, well, I can just do that later. Oh, I don't have to do that until another time. Still be conscious of that project and what's going to require to get it done. But just, I guess another part to all that too is, like I said, we didn't have to have this done right away. We had some time to, sit and think about more ideas, or sit and wait for some things to come in, or we just have to get it done right away.
Really not only that, this was a self-imposed deadline to hold by anyways.
Right. This wasn't a necessary project. We decided we wanted to do. But I guess even the self-imposed part of it would have been easy for us to say, let's just do it. Let's just push it back a month. Let's push it back a month. But we both said, okay, well, this is the project we want. This is the timeline we want. So let's get it done by this time. So even the self-imposed ones, I think if you really want to set yourself up for success, you can say, hey, here's what I'm going to done. This is what I'm going to done by. And don't let yourself, compromise or budge those kind of deadlines or timelines you set for yourself too, outside of any certain circumstances. Health problems arise, family issues arise, unforeseen circumstances arise. And if those things happen, then you can kind of reassess and move your deadlines. But in our case, we had plenty of time. We got it done when we said we were going to get it done, and now we're here doing this. But I guess that's another component too to all these projects is a lot of this stuff might become fluid, especially your recreational projects. Your necessary projects most likely will have a deadline of some sort. Just that's what makes them necessary or required, is they have to be done now, or they have to be done so that this can happen or whatnot. But those other ones you can kind of have authority over and say, hey, this is what I want. Here's what I want to buy. And again, tying into your goals, setting that timeline and that deadline for it can help you also get those projects done too. So maybe there's more or a different way to look at that too. But as you're just talking about this one specifically, I was thinking about how that also plays a factor into your projects is time and timeline type things.
Right. And, that actually brings us right into the next point that I was going to make was the due date. And really that's what you're talking about is the due date for this. And I guess before I say this next part, I'm going to ask you, so let's say you have we'll talk about projects specifically now. You have a project, you have a due date for it. What does that due date mean to you? What is that definition for you?
Well, of like due date?
Mm-hmm.
When I want the product to be completed.
When you want the product to be completed. Right. So that's a DUE date. Due date.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay. So August Bradley is on YouTube. He's got a ton of Notion stuff and systems thinking, hugely beneficial. If you haven't heard of him, check him out. Wonderful. But I learned this from him, and this is kind of a definitely a mindset shift. So lots of people, when they're thinking about tasks or projects, they think of due date as in DUE date. When is this due by? But what he proposes is to think about that as a DO date. So instead of when it's due by, it's the date that you plan on doing that task. So it's a DO date instead of a DUE date. And again, this is all, so let's say a phone bill. And this would be a one-time, this would be a task instead of a project. But this works. If I have a task to pay the phone bill, I know that phone bill is due, DUE, by this day. I want to do DO that before that day. And I can have, not infinite, but I have, a relative good amount of time before it is DUE when they have to have the money in order to do DO that task. This is such a change for how I have thought about these things in the past, because often I worked on the DUE date. When is this due? When is the deadline for this? And then oftentimes you're working right up to that deadline. And sometimes, frequently, that causes you to put out less quality work than you would otherwise put out because you're pushing yourself. You're going right up to the line and then doing that work, as opposed to this is the day I want to do this thing. This is the day I want to do it. Like it would be almost like you're scheduling. I want to pay the phone bill on this day, as opposed to saying, I'm going to pay. I guess scheduling it and making a scheduled date and a DO day are basically the same thing, but just thinking about them in terms of doing, like when are you going to do this task, as opposed to when is it due by.
But I also think that ties into exactly what we're talking about with tasks and projects. Your project is due, DUE, on this day, but you can set up times and schedule times for you to do DO, your tasks, the tasks that eventually lead to completing that project too. I like that. I'm sure you've told me that before, but that went over my head. And
I don't know that I have.
Oh.
I that's something I implement. I saw in there, saw him talk about. I implemented it into my system, and I just kind of went about my day. It was a big change for me to think about those in different terms of, okay, this is due. I have to figure out then a time to do it. But if I just put into my system, whether it's a task, and even not in goals obviously, but my SMART goals, my projects, my tasks they all have a DO date assigned to them, which is basically me scheduling them to do on this day. Now, sometimes they also have a DUE date in there as well, which is, okay, it has to be done by this day, but I would like it to be done much earlier than that. And you know me, I like to do things like awfully early. So if it's due a month from now, I would like to do it now, so it's done. So yeah, I don't know that we have actually talked about that before. That was something that I saw, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, I wish I would have known this when I was in school.
I didn't know it that long ago. I'm sorry.
That'd have been nice to know, though. I mean, but now we can talk about it here and
Yes.
someone else can learn about it too.
Right.
And, talking about this too, and a big component of this, which is, I think, probably a reason people are listening, which I would hope so, is that you need to take responsibility of this, especially these self-imposed or these recreational projects, or however you want to call it. Maybe recreational is a bad choice because then it seems like it's a lot of fun, but these self-imposed projects, you need to be responsible for, and you need to take the initiative to set up these tasks and set up your due dates of various kinds and actually get this stuff done, because, you could have that due date, paying a bill, you have an outside force that you're responsible to paying that bill to, or you have things that are going to happen. You don't pay your phone bill, your phone's going to get turned off, or you don't pay your electric bill, your power goes off, or someone gets mad at you and they come arrest you because you didn't pay your bills. Again, those are outside forces working against you to do those necessary projects. But things that you want to do yourself, no one's going to say, hey, you have to get this done, or else I'm going to take X, Y, or Z away from you. You have to get this done, or you're going to be put in jail, which can happen with other necessary projects. So it really comes down to you taking the initiative to find the motivation or take the actions to motivate yourself to get this stuff done. So all this being said, at the end of the day, it requires a certain kind of person who wants to get things done, or wants to achieve their projects, or wants to have goals, and wants to have, a productive lifestyle to get this stuff done. So, it really requires a lot of effort on your part. And it's that idea that doing the things you have to do things you want to do later. So doing these projects, doing them now so that you can have the end result later, which really requires a discipline and the drive from you, because no one's making you do these things. No one made us set up this podcast studio. No one's making you, go learn a new skill, or making you do a new project, make whatever, XYZ, or whatever it is. But you need to hold yourself accountable if you really want to get these things done. And this is a good way to kind of chunk all that down, complete your tasks to achieve your projects, and really get that stuff done too.
So again, linking back to what we talked about last time, is you're putting your current self through the work in order so your future self can benefit from it. I don't know that if I heard that from somebody, or if I thought about that. I'm sure I didn't think about it. Somebody told me about it. I wish I could tell you who it was, but those two kind of thinking about that really helps me kind of process that. Like, I'm doing this now because I know it's going to benefit me in the future. So my current self, I'm going through the work in order to benefit on the other side, the future me that is there. Yeah, right.
Yes, sir. Yeah, awesome.
So, we talked about projects for a little while. Lots of these things are going to overlap for tasks. But if it's a one-time task, a one action to complete task, then you put it on your board, your task manager, however you do that. I'm a fan of Notion. I have it all in there. If you want to do, reminders or whatever process or app you use for that, you get them on there. And then, you start checking those boxes. For me, I go through, when I do my weekly review, I do kind of a weekly plan. And so I look at my next week. Okay, what tasks do I want to accomplish in that week? And I start scheduling those out on a day. I want to do this on this day. I want to do this on this day, do this. And then what that does is I can look at that day, Wednesday, for example. Okay, Wednesday, I have 18 things to get done. Okay, that's too many for one day. All right, can I move some of these? And because I'm working from a DO day, I can move those a little bit, looking at the DUE day. When is the deadline that it has to be done? I have a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, I have 18 tasks on Wednesday. I have one task on Tuesday. Okay, well, maybe I do a little bit of those early, or, vice versa. You get to move those around. But I have found that planning my week out, looking at those individual single action item steps, those tasks to do, really helps me to have progress made through the week. It helps to set me, do that on Sunday, Saturday night actually, but that way it's all ready for Sunday, and my whole week is ready. Okay, great. I get this done, and then I know that on Monday I have these things, on Tuesday, and the whole week is ready. And do I add things to the week? Yes. Do I sometimes move things to the week? Yes. If I don't get, whatever accomplished for that day, okay, move it to the next one. And so having that kind of look at the week ahead, getting a idea of what the week is going to look like as far as the task goes, hugely beneficial. And if you have things that are, big pushes, heavy loads, or it's going to be hard to complete tasks, maybe you think about putting those early in the week to get those done, to give you that kind of head start, that good feeling as you move into the week, as opposed to leaving those for the end of the week. It's Wednesday. Oh man, on Friday I got to do this. It's Thursday. Oh man, tomorrow I got to do this. It's Friday. Today I have. But you do that early in the week. That way, the rest of your week you can do. Obviously, you're still going to have things to do. But if you can do that heavy item in the beginning of the week, get it done. Then you have to. You don't have to look towards doing that heavy item at the end of the week because it's already done. Now, one thing that I have found creating a task list like this, two things. One is it feels good to check that box. Like it is astonishing how it's I don't know how to describe it. Like it's Andrew Huberman would say it's a dopamine rush. You get to check that box. Wow, that felt good. Now, unfortunately, because of that, you can fall in the category of you're just putting things on the list to check the box. All right, man, I brushed my teeth. Check the box. All right, great. I ate breakfast. Check the box, which is silly. Those are things that you probably don't necessarily need to put on your task list. But there is something to be said about being able to check those boxes. And I think that's where we talked about earlier, motivation follows action. And so you do those action steps. It feels good to do those things, and then that will motivate you to progress further and do the other action things. And so, think about that. That was item number one. Item number two is, from time to time, I have a task, or what I would think of a task that takes 2 minutes or less to do. And it's sometimes on the fly. It's not something I've thought about prior. I don't have it kind of scheduled. I don't have a DO date assigned to it. I see it and, okay, it needs to happen right now, so I just do it. It's not that I see that thing, oh, okay, let me put that in my task list. Okay, great. All right, now go do that. No, I just do those things. And so for me, I have found that from time to time, I am doing things that are not necessarily on my task list, but I'm still doing them. They are tasks. But I see it. Okay, great. I have to take care of this. I don't stop what I'm doing, put it on my task list, and then do it later on. If it, I wish I can associate the person who has this, but I think it's a 2-minute rule. If it takes 2 minutes or less, it's probably David Allen. If you have 2 minutes or less, and David Allen, the author of Getting Things Done, not David Allen, the comedian. Those are two different people. Anyways, if it takes 2 minutes or less, you just do the thing, right? You just. Great. All right, great. Now it's done. I don't take the time to put that in my list and then move forward. So, be mindful of that. It's not that things aren't going to come up. And when they come up, you're going to have to do those things, right? That means you're going to have to shuffle your day or rearrange things. Or perhaps you have a priority level set to your tasks, and then, work or your spouse says, okay, do this. Okay, great. Or the washer machine breaks. Oh man, that wasn't on my list for today, but I got to get it done. Like today, I have to do it. So you adjust everything, whatever the rest of the day looks like, and you put that at the top because you have to do that thing today. So understand that having a task list or even a weekly schedule of this or whatever it is, there's going to be things that come up that are going to take priority or precedent over whatever it is that you have to get done for that day. Which is where I think that having that DO date comes in handy, because I'm not working right up to the deadline. I have some wiggle room. I can adjust things, and before I'm, oh man, I didn't get that proposal in on time. I'm so sorry. Now they won't accept it. I can't, whatever it is. But because I'm working from a DO date, I have that wiggle room. So if, or more than likely, when things come up, because they will, you can adjust and move on the fly for those.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, be in the middle of doing tasks, working towards your project, and then something comes up, you're not going to stop and add that whatever that thing is to your list. That's just part of it. Is was doing this task. In the process of doing this task, I mentioned it earlier, and maybe we won't call it this, but it's kind of a subtask. I have to do this to get this task done. I didn't plan on doing this, but I have to do it regardless. And like you said, the 2-minute or less rule, if you can get it done, just get it done. The nice thing about that is, I think if you're already working on a task, another task comes up, you've already started the action to help motivate yourself. You might be more likely to get that thing done in the moment because you're already working, you're already motivated. But that's just necessary. Things to come up that we don't plan for. But in a kind of a way, you can kind of plan for things to come up that you don't plan for, if that makes any sense. You can maybe not plan for it, but expect it to happen and be prepared to deal with those unexpected type things. It all seems kind of counterproductive saying it out loud, but be prepared for things to come up that you don't necessarily plan for. And I know that we'll probably do another episode or two about our systems and just the way that we run our days, but have an idea of what you want to get done in a certain day. And as we all know, things happen that kind of throw a wrench in some of those plans or add additional things to the plans that we had. It doesn't mean you give up and go back to bed and say, oh, I'll try again tomorrow. You deal with that thing, and then you try to get back on track to the plans you had set up already as much as you can. So that's another way to look at the tasks and subtasks and projects and everything too, is, sometimes you have to do something you didn't plan to do to get done the thing that you did plan to do. But rather than grumble and throw a fit, just do it and get it done and move on with what you had planned to do.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up an interesting point. Speaking of like a timeline, when you think how long you think something's going to take, humans in general are really, really bad at guessing how long something's going to take, and especially if it's something you haven't done before. And so, you might have this thought that I'm going to change the oil on my car. Okay. If that's something you can do, and it's something perhaps you've done in the past, okay, great. I do that. Maybe I think it's going to take 15 minutes, but as you do this, you see, something else that needs to be fixed on the car. And so it takes a little bit longer, or you didn't realize that you don't have the right oil, or the wrench is wrong, or inevitably the way that you have it going in your head is going to be the perfect way it's going to go. It's hard to account for all of those what if type scenarios, and life happens and you get in that situation. You're like, oh man, I forgot I have to do this, or I actually don't have the tool to finish this thing. And so it takes longer than you anticipated it taking. And I have found that if I think something's going to take 15 minutes, sometimes, lots of times, it takes about a half an hour. And so having a opportunity to have that kind of wiggle room in your day, in your schedule to, okay, I think this is going to take 5 minutes. You get into it, 35 minutes later, finally it's done because of whatever happened along the way. So, not to say that you have to account for those things, but at least have that as an idea, as a potentiality that could happen as you're on the way to do those things. And so, I think that's how I think about and talk about, I guess, is what we did today. But I think about and process my tasks and my projects. Do you have anything else to add to those today, sir?
Not so far. No, I'm sure this conversation will continue in various different ways, just as today's conversation tagged off of the goals we talked about last time. So I'm sure we'll cover more things related to this concept or how all this ties together and into being more productive and into being better. But I think that was a good conversation today, and I definitely look at some of these tasks and projects a little bit differently already, and really like the idea of the due date, DO date, rather than the more on top of even the big DUE date, due date.
Yeah, again, for me, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that is super helpful. And yeah, I implemented it right away, and it kind of changed. Not just a tweak. That was a big thing that was not hard to implement, but it was made everything so much easier to do and to think about and just to work forward and progress. Yeah, that was hugely beneficial. And so, I'm thinking perhaps on our next episode, maybe we go into some of the systems of how, you and I set this kind of process up, because, we talked about our goal setting. We talked about, last time Today we talked about tasks and projects and how they're related. And, having goals are great, but goals don't necessarily get you to where you want to go. Having a system in line and gets, perhaps more traction than just having a goal. And so I think that will be the discussion that we lead into next time.
Yes, sir.
All right. So as we discussed last time, I'd like to share the books that I'm reading. I finished my last book, and now I'm on a new one. It's The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I've just barely started it, but this is, I think I've done the first 2 or 3 laws so far. I have seen this book, countless times in places all over, and it's kind of iconic. It's got the red kind of borders, and it's got the blue down the center with the word power on it. Seen it all over, and I, didn't know much what to think of it, and then I got it, and I'm starting to read over, just through the index of the table of context, what are the 48 laws in them? I'm thinking, wow, these are some really interesting things, and almost kind of makes me think of like a spy handbook almost. And so far, the bit that I'm in, it's interesting how he has related these laws or given us examples of those laws through history and like way back in history. And so I'm intrigued and excited to learn more of how to work through and think about those laws. It's been interesting so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I'm kind of getting secondhand some of that book. I know you and I sat down one night before you started reading it, and we kind of went through the table of contents, and we read some of the laws, and even some of the verbiage he uses in there is kind of like, I wonder why he chose what he said and how he's going to tie this into power, but also into more of a positive way, if that makes any sense. So, I mean, if you're interested, pick up the book. I'm sure you can find it lots of places, but I enjoy hearing about the book from you and what you take away from it too. Not that I would never read it myself, but it's cool to hear what you're reading and how you're interpreting it, and kind of the way that he ends up making the points that he's trying to make.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take initiative.